Yes, it is. Good afternoon. Thank you guys for attending the psychology lecture series today. This is a lecture series that we do once per month during the normal semester, so not during the summer. So if you're interested in learning more about psychology outside of the classroom, then you want to take an opportunity to do that again in August and September and October and November. Actually, no, not August. Just September, October, and November of next semester. Today, we're very lucky to have Dr. Scott Walker with us, and he's going to talk about transformational learning. So please give a warm welcome to Scott Walker.
Thanks, Liz. So it's going to be kind of a test for the psychology people. If you're in speech or something else, then you get off the hook, right? You guys seen this before? You guys heard of Kurt Lewin? Nobody's heard of Kurt Lewin? Where's my Kurt Lewin? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you teach it. You teach it and have a PhD in this stuff, so of course.
Bill was asking me about the volume.
Okay, I'll stand out here so you guys can see this. Kurt Lewin is the father of psychology, and he came up with this formula in 1936 where he's kind of a behavioralist kind of guy. B is behavior equals a function, F, of person and their environment. That's kind of the idea this guy came up with in the 30s. And it's a behavioralist learning theory that emphasizes change in behavior that's a result from stimulus response associations made by learners, by students. So behavior is directed by stimuli. So that means if something occurs, then somebody does something. And an individual selects a response based on their prior conditioning or their past experience and the psychological drive existing at the moment of that particular action. That's the environment. And the environment comes, in this particular case that we're talking about here, it comes in two flavors. There's the alpha press and the beta press. Press is what the environment does. So the environment doesn't actually do things. I mean, what's going on in this room doesn't actually do things, but people react to particular things. So if I started treating you poorly, you might get up and leave. That would be the environment pressing on you to do something. And environmental press comes in these two flavors of the alpha press and the beta press. And the alpha press is something that somebody can observe. So if David's sitting back there in the back of the room, he could sit and he could write down what's going on in this classroom based on his observations. But looking at just observation and what you see from an external perspective only, you can't necessarily get at what's really going on. So then there's the beta press. It's the perspective of the environmental press from the actors in the environment, the people in that environment. So that would be you. So if I ask you to write something down based on how you think or how you feel right now, that would be the beta press in terms of the environment. Now, what if we added some new experience to this past experience to try to change your person's view of the world and thus change their behavior? We would get something like this. I made this one up. This is where B, behavior, is a function of a person's previous experience and a person's new experience. So it's a little bit different than the other one. And as adults, we all define our world through a particular frame of reference that we have, that we come to the table with. By adding a new experience, we can change a person's frame of reference, and we can change their worldview, we can transform them, we can change their thinking, and possibly change their behavior. That's kind of the premise of what's going on here. But the problem is, you, all of us as adults, we tend to reject ideas that don't fit neatly into our preconceived notions of the world. That's stuff that we bring with us. Some people might call that baggage. Some people just call it past experience. We give those things that we don't agree with necessarily labels like weird, irrelevant, mistaken, aberrations, nonsense, that kind of thing. The problem, though, is that when we create understanding solely based on our view of the world, on our past experience, we often can't come up with answers to new questions and challenges that ask us to think different. So the point is to think different. And this is a problem in terms of learning, especially in higher education, or even, I guess, education at all levels, is we being those who are your instructors in creating your learning environment, we tend to emphasize task completion and not necessarily emphasize dialogue or discussion about the issues and the topics at hand. You could say we breed a richness of information and a poverty of understanding. Lots of information is out there, but people don't necessarily understand all that stuff. Especially in today's time with technology, the technologies we have, there's information all the time feeding in. We're always getting information, but we may not necessarily understand what's going on. And if we accept the notion that our adult understanding is created under the influence of the hegemony of social cultural constructs, hegemony is what is like the social norms. If that is our understanding, is created under that, we may not necessarily be acting in our own best self-interest, and it behooves us to look toward altering or shifting or changing our perspectives in order to make sense of the world through a shift of consciousness, and we call that a transformation. And that transformation is really what it is learning, and it's looking at the world in a different way. So in the work that I've been doing, I can kind of categorize this notion of transformative learning or transformation in these four categories. This perspective transformation, this is what you view the world and your change of that. Perspective transformation. And the cognitive rational approach is kind of the premise that I'm working on here. It's a shift in perspective of meaning. And as the learner, what it looks like is the practice of cognitive dissonance, which is and a reflection on one's way of thinking, dialogue, and then some action that's a response to all of that. Now, depth psychology, I don't know a whole lot about this. I'm not a Jungian type psychologist by any means. I'm not even a psychologist. But what this is essentially getting at is individuation based on resolving personal predicaments and developing consciousness of individual differentiation. Talk to Dr. Wright about that if you want to know more. I'm sure she has some background on it. The structural developmental approach, this one, is what we can refer to as post-formal thinking that involves shifts in the way we know that is inclusive and integrative. It brings a lot of things in together. And this is kind of the level of transformation that occurs in, say, doctoral and graduate students. When in a graduate level courses and doctoral level courses in university, you're not sitting around reading a book, listening to a lecture, and taking multiple choice tests. You are creating new knowledge. You're integrating what other people think and what other people say, testing that, and creating something new out of that. And we refer to that as post-formal thinking. It's hard to do. So if you've ever had that instructor who gives you an open-ended assignment in a class without a lot of parameters, and you kind of go, what am I supposed to be doing? They're not telling me what to do. That might be because you're struggling with post-formal learning if you're not quite getting that type of thing. And then this notion of social emancipatory, that approach is the Paulo Freire approach on critical consciousness that is developing awareness of our socio-cultural reality through doing something, action, reflection, and discourse. Now, it's this cognitive rational approach that we're working off of here. And we start with disorienting dilemmas. And this follows the cognitive dissonance theory. Do you guys know what cognitive dissonance is? Of course, Liz knows what it is. Cognitive dissonance is when you're right at the edge of understanding. You ever had that feeling in class that I just don't quite get it? And if you put your mind to it, you read a little more, you ask a few more questions, finally you kind of like, oh, aha, that's it. Cognitive dissonance is that business of not quite getting it. Or in some cases, it's the business of a disorienting dilemma, a dilemma that shifts your thinking. It disorients your mind, your thinking, the way you're paying attention to the world. And then self-reflection is when you think about what that was that just occurred, that disorienting dilemma, that cognitive dissonance. And it's also, you could refer to it as metacognition. Thinking about your own thinking, that's what self-reflection is. You sit there and you go, why did I think that? Or how did I come to that conclusion? That's metacognition or self-reflection. And then the third one is critical discourse, and that's having a discussion on the issue at hand, making meaning of everybody's preconceived notions. Discourse is writing something out or speaking to one another, people communicating with one another, that's discourse. And when you have two or three people talking about something, you begin to see other people's view of the world and other people's perspectives. And then finally, acting, that's the behavior part. That's when people change what they actually do. You can get some kind of disoriented dilemma all day long. You can think about it and you can talk about it, but if you don't act on it, then your behavior hasn't changed. And an example of this might be you learn about something in a class and then you go tell people about it. That's acting. It's a behavioral change. Or you might do something different. Now, in terms of education, this really jacks with the model of the expert-centered world of teaching, which the expert-centered world of teaching is where the expert stands in the front of the class and tells you how it is, kind of like I'm doing it now. But in a classroom situation where you just get lectured at, the expert is on top of it, the expert knows all, and the expert's going to give you information, and you're going to give information back, and therefore you know, which typically doesn't work. When we encourage dissent, that's students dissenting or changing, trying to change other people's minds or questioning or challenging, it's a lot more difficult for instructors. And it's even more difficult for students who are in the classroom working in an environment where there's dissent and questioning going on. Because a lot of students really like the neat packaged classroom where you go in, you sit down, you listen to a lecture, you take notes, you take a test, and you get a grade, right? That's how it's been for 12 or 13 or 14 years, however long you've been in school. But when we shake that up with these things here, it actually makes it harder. But we learn more. We transform. We can change our perspective of the world. Now let's look at some disoriented dilemmas. Let's see what it is that I'm actually talking about. Have you seen that family before? Aren't they cute? This is the idyllic, utopic, post-World War II, socio-political myth that resulted from the prosperity of the 1950s. You know, Leave It to Beaver, that kind of thing. Am I talking over y'all's heads? Leave It to Beaver, the little guy, TV show, when I was a kid. Okay, we're talking about family values here. This is like the family value scenario, this mythical family. It was politicized in the 1992 election between the first George Bush and Bill Clinton and Ross Perot. Family values, family values. That's all they talked about. Well, they talked about other things, but a lot of talk about family values this way and that way. But this type of family value, this family is a myth. In fact, you might be interested to know that in 1900, the year 1900, there were as many children living in single-family households as there were in 1960, which is right after this picture was taken. And that might be a little disorienting to you, but it's factual. But there are other types of families, right? These are families. These two guys with their adopted child, that's a family. These two women with their child, that's a family as well. And the disorientation part of this, the disoriented dilemma, is that some of you may have this as your view of a family, and some of you may have this as your view of the family, but some of you may have never thought about this before. And it kind of just changes your thinking a little bit. That's my point. Kind of changing your thinking light. Here's another one, religion. This is a really good one. This is people die over religion. It's a very contentious kind of thing. This is religion, right? Happy guy, smiling, everybody's happy. Religion is bright and light and cheery, and everybody's getting blessed, and everybody is that particular religion. Or is this religion? This guy's Christian, this guy's Muslim. Now, we always thought, or if you look at the hegemony, the social, high-level social structure that pushes on our culture in the United States, it is the Islamic community that is attacking the fundamental values of the Christian community or the United States. But in some places, it's the opposite. This guy is the Christian attacking the unarmed Muslim guy. This was in December of 2013 in the Central African Republic. The point is, that is what a lot of people think of religion. This is what religion is to some people. So that might change your perspective on religion a little bit. Let's take a look at borders. Here's the militarized U.S. border. This is the United States. That's Mexico. We got the gun, the helmet. We've got to keep them out. The bad people on the other side. We don't want them on this side. We've got our stormtroopers here on their quads, carrying guns, wearing helmets. They got their American flag flying. That's a border, right? U.S.-American border. And what may be a little bit disorienting to some of you is that here's how we treat American citizens along our U.S.-Mexico border. Read the headline. She came across the border March 2014. This isn't old stuff. This is how it is now. She came across the border. The Border Patrol, Homeland Security, suspected the woman of carrying drugs. They searched her. She didn't have any drugs, but they still suspected her of carrying drugs. So where else are you going to carry drugs? Let's go looking for them. So they took her to the hospital, and they put her on a table, and they said, we're going to look and we're going to find the drugs, whether you consent or not. And they looked, and they didn't find any drugs. So they said, well, she's carrying drugs. We know she's carrying drugs. So they forced her to take medicine so that she would have a bowel movement, or more than one or two or three. And checked that to see if she was carrying drugs, and she wasn't carrying drugs. All this time, she was being held in the hospital by the Homeland Security, and then they sent her a bill for $5,000. That's our Border Patrol. But it doesn't have to be that way. It could be this way. Germany, on this side over here, Austria. Border Patrol. That pot, which actually lights up at night, it kind of glows, is the border. It's the line. You can walk across the border and you don't have to show any passport. There's nobody searching you, doing body cavity searches, forcing you to have bowel movements or anything like that. Same thing goes on here. Here's Germany on this side, and I don't know what that is on that side, but you can see that you can just easily ride your bike across it, and it doesn't have to be this. There are other ways to do things. And that might change your perspective a little bit. In fact, in all of these countries in blue, you can cross the border from one place to another without having to show a passport or any kind of ID. I went from here to here, Spain to France, a few years ago. I got off the train in France, and I looked around for the passport checkpoint, and there wasn't one. And I stuck my head out the doors slide open to the street, and I looked around, where's the passport checkpoint? There wasn't one. It was the weirdest thing, because in my mind, this is a border. Yes?
But do they have the same government?
No, this is Spanish government, French government, German government, Italian government.
But their system isn't as bad as Mexico, I'm pretty sure.
What you're alluding to is the differentiation in borders, in
I'm saying
the similarity.
they have that there for reasons why we can't let them just come over here like they want to.
That's true. But you know what? Some of the world has figured out how to make it work.
Yeah, but they're not, their system's not as bad as Mexico's.
But some of the world has figured out how to make it work. How could we make it work where we don't have to do that is the question. That's just a dilemma that we have to contend with. Yes?
You referred to immigration, that if we didn't have the wall there, we would have too many immigrants coming in.
Well, no, it's not just immigrants, it's that there's a lot of stuff going on down there that they would bring over here if we didn't stop it from coming right through.
The French would argue the same of the Eastern Europeans.
Exactly, but that's what I'm saying, we don't know their history. What if they have it better than they do?
There are still issues, but it's a different mindset.
It's a different perspective, and the point is to introduce a perspective that is different than the one you already have, and it is a disorienting dilemma, which is why you're questioning it. Which is what I'm saying. Now that we have to contend with your question, it makes it a lot more difficult for me. I can't just put a multiple choice answer and go, should we have open borders or not? And you go, no or yes. Now I have to contend with explaining to you or not explaining to you or defending it or not defending it. And it makes my job more difficult as I'm no longer the expert. Now it's like, oh wow, somebody doesn't agree with my idea, and I got to shift and either try to convince her or let it go at that. My point is, it's a transformation in thinking. You might end up doing some international work someday and go, hey, in the Shenzhen area in the EU, they figured this out somehow, and it may be possible for us to do that here. I don't know. Yes.
When you say in that area, like they travel between each other, you go to each other's countries and stuff, like they go and can they reside here, or they can only visit, or like do they have to, like here, like you have to pay, like is it here, like is it about money, like is the U.S. more concerned about we just want more money, like if you want a visa, like you have to pay, you might not even get the visa.
Oh, you're talking about. Are you referring to permanent residency versus just like tourism, like traveling back and forth?
Can they just like up and leave and say, I'm going to go live in France now? Like, or they have to get permission? And then do they have to pay to get permission?
You don't have to have a visa. I know that much to go from one place to another. Melody?
When they actually have become a full member of the EU after being a member for 7 years, you can freely move within the European Union, settle, reside there, move from Poland to France, and have full benefits in France.
Okay, that answers. I didn't know that, so that answers the question. What I do know is that if you go from here to here, it's like driving your car from here to Louisiana, and you just drive.
States, like moving from Texas to Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Which is a shift in the way. That's not how we think of borders between countries. So there's a different way of thinking is my point to this. Now, there's this one too. Terrorism, all terrorists are guys with long beards and hats that are different than Nobody in here is wearing a hat. Different than the hats that you normally see around here, right? Long beards, hats that are different than the hats that we see. Those are terrorists. That's how you would describe a terrorist. Now I'm being smart aleck, right? These are terrorists. They don't look like your stereotypical terrorists that you might see on TV news, do they? Wade Page shot up a bunch of Sikhs. Sikhs are a group of people who wear turbans, but they're not Muslim. He thought he was shooting up a bunch of Muslims. Timothy McVeigh blew up a building in Oklahoma. His buddy Terry Nichols helped him. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Unabomber being like university bomber. He was sending bombs in packages to universities, and some professor would open it and it would blow up. I'm glad they caught him. This guy right here, Eric Rudolph, he planted a bomb at the Atlanta Olympics, blew up several people. Eric Harris, shooter at Columbine. Charles Roberts, Amish shooting. He went into a school and shot a bunch of Amish people. That kid right there, cute little kid with a smile, Sandy Hook shooter Adam Lanza. So the point here is that not all terrorists look like that other guy that you just saw there. And that's what disorienting dilemmas look like. So there's not just one way of looking at it. There are multiple points of view. Now, I want to shift to something that probably is not covered in your psychology classes, and this is what I call going old school. Going old school. 2,550 years ago. This is related, so we can consider this kind of altogether different approach, an Eastern approach instead of our typical Western approach. The other stuff is coming from Kurt Lewin. Kurt Lewin was German or Austrian, right? One of the two, German. And we could consider the world from the Buddhist psychology perspective, derived from the Shedras. Those are monastic colleges in Tibet. And there was a book written called the Abhidharma, composed by a guy named Vasubandhu Hu in 300 BC. And the Abhidharma is a book called Higher Teachings, is kind of how it translates into English. And from this perspective, the self, your ego, the word in Sanskrit is Atman. The Atman is what we think of ourselves. And it comes in two different flavors. I call it two different flavors. This gross concept of ego is who we are, who I am. I am a professor. I am a father. I am a brother. I am good at this. I'm not good at that. I fit in here and I don't fit in over there with that situation. And the second part of that would be a conceptualization of self and other. That's you and everything external to you. And you have ideas of who your friends are, who your enemies are, what you like, what you don't dislike. It's everything outside of yourself. So yourself and other. And then you can take that to a little more subtle level, and those things that we perceive with our senses as being either familiar or unfamiliar. And this goes back to that notion that those things that are unfamiliar to us, we sometimes try to push away, and if we don't accept them, it's difficult to solve new problems with our old way of thinking. So in this Buddhist perspective, these are called the three poisons, or the three cliches. And it's passion, aggression, and ignorance. And it's not ignorance like, oh, I'm just kind of stupid. It's more like ignoring something. So when you see something or someone, if they're your friend or they're not your friend, or you just don't care. So passion would be you're kind of attracted to someone. And that may not attracted like, sexually attracted or something, but attracted like, that person's my friend, oh, hey, how's it going? Or aggression is when you push something away. You don't like it. And then ignorance is just like when you pass somebody in the hall and you just like totally don't pay attention to them. So one of my passions is chocolate Pop-Tarts. One of my aggressions would be English green peas. I don't like them. I will literally push them away. And then other stuff I just ignore. I don't care about. Those are the three things. So one of the things that you can take away from today is when you walk back across campus and you start seeing people, is it something you like, you dislike, or you just don't care? And this is typically, this is called from a centralized standpoint. You're the center looking out at everything else. And then we'll protect our ego and our self and our worldview, and we'll try not to change those in a lot of cases. So let's run through some of these and see what you think. There's multiple choice. I like, or passion, not that he's hugging her and they're passionate, but do you like the picture, do you like the scene, do you like the scenario? Or do you think something about that you would like to ignore, push away, you don't like, or you just don't care? Think about it. You guys don't have to answer on these, but I'm going to change the picture, and I want to see if, think to yourself, does my thinking change now? They live in their car. Here's another one. I'm going to pull up a picture and think of it in terms of attraction, pushing away, or you just don't care. Okay, you got that? I got to move around some more. Yeah, we're on a sensor somewhere. Okay, so you got your thing in mind, one of those three poisons or cliches? Maybe it changed for somebody now. Maybe that's a disorienting dilemma. This is Jennifer Zobair. She's a Muslim author who wrote a book called Painted Hands. You might not think of that as your typical Islamic woman. So let's leave the Atman and this older Buddhist perspective that I just kind of briefly tapped into and go back to the Western cognitive perspective of self-reflection. What is self-reflection? I touched on it a little bit. It's metacognition, thinking about our own thinking, and questioning, why did I think that? So take a second and do that. The picture of the woman or the picture of the couple in the car, why did you think whatever it was, whether you're attracted or aggressive toward it or didn't care, why did you think that? I often ask my students, why did you say that? When I teach cultural geography, and we talk about religion, and I'll have students write down their religion. And we don't do it openly because a lot of people have lots of different perspectives on religion. Well, I'll ask them, why are you the religion you are? Why do you believe that? And I'll walk around the room while people are writing, and I'll just get a lot of just blank pages. Because a lot of people really don't know why they think what they think. Now, a lot of people are like, they're writing stuff down. The Bible says this, or, the Quran is this way, or whatever their perspective is. And they have a real strong perspective, but a good chunk of people don't really know why they think the way they do. A lot of it is family-oriented. Your family does this, so I just do it that way.
Scott?
Yes?
Question for you, going back a little bit, talking about the moving towards and aggressive and not attractive or not caring. In some instances, I find that people are not attracted to an image, but find it interesting, but also in it makes me feel bad sort of way. So how would you describe that in terms of Buddhist philosophy?
Well, you would, if it's something that repels you, it may be interesting, but in a bad sort of way. that might be considered aggression or something that repels you or you want to push away eventually, even though you're still looking at it. You don't want to be involved with it or something like that.
Well, I'm trying to think in terms of like my research with veterans. I'm interested in it because I want to see what the experience is, and I want to be able to help people to voice their experiences. But it's not as if I necessarily want to sit and listen to some of these horrible stories that people tell me. Does that make sense? So the end goal is what I want, but sometimes the process is not positive.
Yeah,
It's a sacrifice. Yeah, Dami's right. It is. It's a sacrifice. If you want to reach the end goal, then you have to do something that you may not be attracted to because you're attracted to the end goal.
but the end goal would be the thing you're attracted to.
Right.
Right, and there may be some intermediate thing between you and the end goal that you're not so attracted to.
Right.
Like PhD at the end of my name, and then 4 years or 3 years or 2 years of work between where you are and PhD. Yeah, you might not be so attracted to that, but there's attraction toward what the grasping of the thing at the end.
So which feeling do you go with? I mean,
No, there's nothing.
how would you label it?
That's a lot of tasks though. That's like saying you want to come to school, right? But you don't want to be in school for 4 years to get a good education so you can make better pay. But in the end, you're going to get better pay and a better job anyway. But you don't like going to school, but you're still doing it anyway, right?
We can differentiate though between stuff that we try to do and achieve and other people and other things, objects, and people being objects in this case, as opposed to a process of doing something to achieve a goal. I think might be a separation on this particular kind of thing.
Like, kind of like what I see, or like my perspective, what I'm, is like, kind of what you're saying, I'm not putting words in my mouth, but it's just, like I said, just my perspective, just like what I'm learning right now is like, what I'm getting from this is that you kind of have to like make yourself uncomfortable. Like sometimes, you know, you're not always gonna like how she said, you're not always gonna like it, but then in the end, like you end up learning, like, and kind of like in between, like it's not always gonna be something you want to hear or make you comfortable. Like, kind of like you have to be uncomfortable in order to like learn new ways of thinking. Like how you're saying, like that whole thing, like that it's harder. Like if something's not what you're used to, and it's just like harder, like what you were saying earlier.
My answer is yes. Yes. It's that struggle, the cognitive dissonance is the struggle that is often caused by a disorienting dilemma. So I think, what's your name? Sabrina was struggling with this idea of borders, maybe the way I presented it or something. I don't know. I'd have to ask more questions to get more detail, but she was struggling with something there, and that struggle may or may not lead to learning or not. I don't know. She may have a different perspective. She might not. But that is the point, and that's kind of a perfect segue to where I'm going. Let me finish up this, though. The self-reflection is thinking about it, which you just did. And then critical discourse is when we open things up for discussion, and we can talk about it, and we can get a different perspective, different ideas. Which critical discourse is why diversity is good. Diversity in terms of everything from gender to ethnicity to religion to whatever it is. A group of people that's not homogenous comes to the table with a lot of different ideas, and they may disorient you, and you may not necessarily agree with them when you reflect on them, but you at least have exposure to something new and to something different. And then acting is that, again, that business of actually changing things. And we can quantify it to look like this. 214 students. The number of students equals 214. Anthropology and geography, last semester. This is the disorienting dilemma student, disorienting dilemma environment. So this is what the student thinks. This is the beta press, the student's perspective of whether there were disorienting dilemmas in a classroom. And this is whether they thought the class psychosocial environment led to, or created opportunities for disorienting dilemmas. The extent to which disorienting dilemmas were used in the classroom that they took.
That's the alpha, right?
Yes. Yeah, because it's external. It's viewing the other stuff. Now, this is the self-reflection, the student's perspective of themselves. Did they self-reflect? And 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest. Were there opportunities, or what was the extent of the opportunity for students to self-reflect in that classroom? Now, often instructors create this environment. Often instructors allow students to be involved in creating the environment, or sometimes instructors just don't create an environment and they shut it down. This is the discourse, the critical discourse, which is meaning, perspective, and critical discourse. Did the student think that they had critical discourse? Participated in critical discourse to this extent? And this is the environment. Did the environment create opportunities for that? And you can see this is the highest one on here. It's because anybody who's been around here for a while going to this school knows that collaborative learning is a real common way of getting things done in our classrooms, right? Which is discourse. It's talking to one another. And then this is acting. Did I change my behavior? And then this is, were there opportunities to demonstrate me changing my behavior? And that could be in writing or answering questions in front of the class or something. And this one is student satisfaction. This is affect. This is how people feel. These are psychosocial perspectives based on transformative learning. But this is feeling. I'm satisfied with this. Yeah, this is good. I like it. You can see where we have some difficulty in these particular classes, and this is true across the college. You'll see another graph in a minute, or another table in a minute that shows this with a few more students. So what it's saying is that in our classrooms, we're not offering students enough opportunity to have disorienting dilemmas. Because if you're in that class where the instructor talks at you and you take notes and you might answer a question or two, or some of you who've really got it down, when you're asked a question or the instructor asks a question in general, and all you have to do is look down and not make eye contact, they won't follow up with you, right? You know how that works. I see it all the time. It's going on right now. But we spend a lot of time talking about it. So these things that I've been talking about are actually quantifiable with the survey instrument, which is where I got these numbers from. Yeah, Melody.
Why do students think that they're having more disorienting times in their minds? Why is that first column so much higher than us establishing the environment?
They may be disoriented.
They may be disoriented.
Now, I didn't necessarily set it up that way, but they might have spent some time going, it's that kind of scratching your head sort of thing. And
Even if the instructor's not setting that up on purpose.
Right.
Okay.
And you could get this out of your textbook,
Okay.
right, as opposed to being in the classroom environment, I would say. Now, in reality, with quantitative research, those are the questions, those are the follow-up questions for qualitative research, where we would have to get these groups of students together, representative group of these people, and ask them those questions. This is like the first step of this sort of thing when you're doing psychological research. At least that's the way I look at it. Now, this one is with number of students equals 649. There's the disoriented dilemma. It's the same thing. The student and the environment, self-reflection, student environment, critical discourse, student environment, acting, student environment, and then satisfaction. This is what we're measuring against. So this, in this particular case, is our dependent variable, and these are our independent variables. And the mean, this is the answers. The mean, these are means, and these are means. They're in number form instead of a bar chart, right? Standard deviation, and R, which is the simple correlation. It's a bivariate relationship looking at the association between these things up here and satisfaction right across here. And then B, beta, is the regression coefficient. And what it's doing is it's looking at for how much satisfaction is expected to increase or decrease. How much satisfaction will increase or decrease if this goes up 1? So, and they're all controlled for each other. So if the disorienting dilemma of the students goes up 1, satisfaction will go up 0.04%. If we can raise disorienting dilemma in the environment, satisfaction is going to go down. It's negative. There's a negative, see these two here have negative relationships. So the strongest one is talking with each other. So an environment set up, 0.49, 0.38 are the two highest ones. So the strongest relationship between satisfaction, students are more satisfied when we can talk about stuff. We can have critical discourse. You guys are satisfied with that. At least these people were. What you're not so satisfied with, what makes satisfaction go down, is when we throw critical discourse, disorienting dilemmas at you. Or we put pictures of the Pope up there, and then the next slide is some guy with a knife, and we go, that's religion too. For whatever reason, that makes satisfaction go down in a classroom. Yes?
So are you saying that if someone's way of thinking is challenged, or you introduce a new way of thinking, students have a hard time dealing with that?
Exactly. Now, I would submit that that makes students uncomfortable, and that discomfort changes the satisfaction. It's like, whoa, I'm not so satisfied with that class because I felt like challenged. People were dissenting, people were questioning, and I wasn't so satisfied with that. But I would say that if we can increase these things, actually people learn more than the whole idea of listening to a lecture, taking a test, and getting a grade. So we're talking about transforming our thinking. And not all adult education is aimed at transforming our thinking. A lot of it is aimed at whether or not you can memorize something and give me an answer back. I'm here to transform your thinking. I'm not here for you to regurgitate a response. So in my classes, you'll see a lot of this stuff going on. In fact, I like to shake people up. Did you have a comment?
Well, one of the things I was going to say is I wonder if when students experience a disorienting dilemma, if they stop there, if they don't do that self-reflection, if that's when they don't learn, that's when they don't feel satisfaction in the classroom.
If
they continue through the self-reflection and into acting, then maybe that's where the satisfaction increases.
That's quite possible, because self-reflection, when you give students the opportunity to self-reflect, it's not huge. I mean, 1 is the ultimate goal here. 1 is perfect, and this is only, a quarter. But there's opportunity for that. Same with this one and this one and this one and this one. These numbers aren't really big, but the idea is that you go through this first, this next, and you may get this as an outcome. So we can offer disoriented dilemmas, but we need to stop and create environments where people are thinking about them. And if your idea in your life is to transform your thinking so that you're more able to solve, back to this, you're more able to solve new problems. If that's your goal in life, which that's kind of, employers are looking for people who can solve new problems, not think the same old way, then you might want to take away from this, okay, when I get a disorienting dilemma, I need to stop and think about it. Where does that come from? Where does my thinking start? Why do I think the way I did? And then if there's possibility for discourse, talking, writing, making it apparent to other people, that would be the next step, which might change my behavior. And behavior is not, whether I'm mind my manners or that kind of thing, open the door for somebody or say cuss words or whatever. Behavior is also a way of thinking. Did you have a comment?
I was going to ask about the way of thinking, like how you're saying, because like how you're saying, so say someone that's never been exposed to the disorienting dilemmas, like how you're saying you've gone to school 12 years, like cookie cutter type learning, and then you get exposed to something different, and then like over time can you like sort of like build up a new way of thinking? I mean, like a way of problem solving. Like if you're like exposed more to like disorienting dilemmas, like then does it become easier like when you're like repeatedly like your students, like how you're saying you like to do that to them, like or whatever. But like then throughout the year, does it become easier for them to deal with that when they get like a new problem?
I think so, because there's first of all in my particular classes, therein is the learning environment that I try to establish is one that is open, and our aim here is to think outside the box and think in new ways. And your thinking may think this way, and your thinking may be that way. But at first, students come in the first week of class, and they're expecting to take notes, take a test, that kind of thing. And then I start shifting it around. And after 3 or 4 weeks of class, people will throw out their ideas without even being prompted to throw them out anymore. So I think there is an opening in the way we think when we use this type of thinking. And in a college career as a whole, if you get it in different areas. So if you get this in psychology, and you get it in some other social science, and then you get it in your natural science, and then you get it in your humanities, you come out the other side with a bigger brain that's got more perspective, different perspectives in it, especially than when you went in. And if you just sit in a class and you answer questions, you may get the content. You may know a whole lot about I don't know. What do you guys do in psychology? You may know a whole lot about classical conditioning. But you know the content of it, but unless you've been challenged with ways of thinking about it different, it'll just kind of run out your ears when you walk out the door. Because your whole goal is to just answer the test questions, memorize some stuff, and get it finished. But if your goal is to transform the way you think, then the more you're exposed to this, I think the broader perspective you have at the end.
I just want to add, we're both geographers. I'm always encouraging my geography students see more of the world. Ideally, go to college someplace else where you're around students who have a different culture than what you've grown up with. The favorite food downtown is totally different than what you grew up with. Does that make it bad or good? Maybe it's a different language. All of these things, using a different type of bathroom. What, you didn't know there was a different type of bathroom? Yeah, going to a foreign country, you might be exposed to a different. Just all of these things help transform you in some way or another. You don't have to like them, you don't have to love them, but you're aware of them, and it's an experience.
Yeah, he's got to come in here.
So it's a change of environment, change of learning environment that helps you understand and learn more, or grasp and all. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, there are two things I'm saying. You guys as students can take this information now and do what you want with it, but you can go in my classes that I'm taking. When I'm studying, I need to think about where my thinking's coming from, and if there's any opportunity to talk about it with other students in the class, try that. I'm also saying for faculty, for instructors, is anybody in here going to be a teacher? No teacher ed types? For instructors here at a place like this, we should be doing more of these kinds of things. Transformative learning, this perspective transformation in adult learners is a relatively new theory. It's only been around since the late 1960s, which is new in terms of learning theories, because a lot of learning theories come from the 1800s and the 1930s and things like that. So I'm saying two different things. It's good for you to keep these things in mind, and you might ask for those disorienting dilemmas. You know, what is it that's different about something that you're talking about in class? What is the stuff that can change the perspective that most people have? And ask, what are the different things? What is, I don't know, it depends on the situation, but you could ask those questions and take that on yourself. Okay, Mas.
Okay, I probably sound like the crazy lady, but does this like promote like mental health? Because it sounds like it would be like, okay, I'm gonna be like weird, but it sounds kind of like it would be like rewarding or exciting to learn a different way of thinking and like take on these like a new way of problem solving or critical thinking, and like instead of just always just automatic mode, doing the same thing and thinking a particular way every single time. And, like, does this like promote like mental health, like as far as like how you're saying like adults, like maybe they don't know like different ways of learning, like they're just automatic. And I'm not saying everybody does that because my teachers don't do that, but I'm just saying like some older adults, like they just only know one way and they're set in their ways.
Yeah, that's the way, my way or the highway kind of thing, right?
Yeah, but it sounds a little bit more rewarding, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Well, it can be rewarding, but it can also be, it can be challenging. And here's a real story from a class. I teach cultural geography. We talk about religion. We also talk about population. We did a paper looking at population data in different countries around the world and gross national product. So the amount of money people make and accrued death rate. When people die, and then accrued birth rate, how many people are born. Or how many people die per thousand, how many people are born per thousand. And this one guy, his perspective is from what I would call a fundamentalist, real right-wing fundamentalist Christian perspective. And his notion was, because I told my students the population in the United States, we're not reproducing ourselves. Instead of, there's like 1.9 children born for each couple, which is not 2, right? It's close to 2, but it's not 2. In Germany and France and other highly industrialized countries, we are not reproducing ourselves in terms of the big, huge picture population. This guy's perspective was that it's abortion that is the reason that we're not reproducing ourselves, not that it's a change in economics and that we're more in the service industries now and less in the farming industry. We don't need all those kids. Kids cost money, right? Kids cost money. Yeah, kids cost money, so we don't have as many kids. You know, my dad came from a family of 12 kids. I've got 2. And why would I have 12 kids? I mean, I can't do anything with them. They cost too much. So, but this guy's perspective was all from this religious perspective. And then he went on about, I don't know how he got off onto this, but it was about female genital mutilation in Islamic culture. And that is why the death rates were higher in the African, sub-Saharan Africa. I was like, oh God, this guy is good. He was stuck in this world like this. So I did a little research and found out, for example, the genital mutilation is not an Islamic thing. It's pre-Islamic. And just as many Christians in these sub-Saharan African countries do female genital cutting on their daughters as the Islamic women did. And it turns out it doesn't have anything to do with religion, it has to do with your culture. Now, for him, that was so difficult to grasp and understand and believe, even with outside information, he dropped my class. He just couldn't take change in his perspective. So in some cases it might be a little more difficult. In some cases it might open up your brain and you're open to more things. I think the more exposure we have to multiple perspectives, the better off we are as people, and the better off we can work with other people and accomplish things and get things done. So I think I've run out of time. We've got about 5 more minutes, so if there are any more questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I don't know, what do you do from here?
We say thank you and we clap. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.